Hello, guys, and welcome back to the SimBoxx Presents Let's Talk Boxing podcast. We've been on somewhat of a hiatus, but we're back in 2025, and there's no better time to get back into the swing of things with boxing. We've been producing content over on SimBoxx, so make sure you check that out on the YouTube channel. But with the podcast, it just allows us to air our opinions on such a vibrant and bustling boxing world at the minute. And today I'm joined by a co-host, a guest co-host, which I'll be doing throughout the weeks and months in 2025. Different co-hosts each week, and this week it is Big Nick Campbell. He jumped on last minute last week to preview Bacoli Parker, so make sure you check that out as well. But first and foremost, Nick, I'm rambling. I told you I would. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be here. This is my first podcast with you, so I'm delighted to be here to talk rubbish with you, have a rant, and see where we end up.
That's it, absolutely. So, first and foremost, the core uh, part of the podcast will be, of course, looking back at the excellent Beterbiev Bivol 2 card out in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia this last weekend. Some cracking fights, some big wins. But what a time boxing is living in at the minute, Nick. You know, with 2025, we're less than 2 months complete. We've already had Bivol, Beterbiev, Derek Chisora, Jack Cattrall, Callum Simpson. I'm sure these fighters that I forgot to name. It's such a boom period for boxing. You know, we thought it was dipping at one point, but of course, with Riyadh season, Turki Al Sheikh coming in, the influence of Saudi Arabia on boxing and these bigger purses, these bigger cards. But it seems now that the money's filtering through, and we're able to get bigger domestic cards as a result.
Yeah, definitely. I think, listen, with the Saudi cards and the card of the weekend was billed as one of the greatest cards of all time. Everything else, like you say, it's filtered through the levels now, and everybody needs to up their game. If you want to compete with Riyadh season, you need to be putting on good cards. And I think as well, because everybody wants to elevate themselves up to those Riyadh cards, the Riyadh season cards, they need to be seen in these big domestic fights to pull their way up through the levels, get themselves into a position where they could get the call to be one of these fights on the Riyadh season card. So it's great for the sport. It's pushing it at every level, and it's making fighters hungry to get out there, get seen, and work their way up to those big paydays and the big shows.
Definitely, you know, it's interesting that you should mention that there, Nick, because one of my slight worries, if you like, that it was kind of like, you know, in the back of my mind that I was kind of pushing to the side because I was enjoying these big cars, these big events, was is this going to suffocate the domestic scene? Because we say, for instance, this past weekend, Joshua Watts against Callum Smith, which is a fight I'm looking forward to dissecting with you, that would sell out the Manchester Arena, the O2 Arena, the Echo Arena in Liverpool, but then that would bring
Yep.
in a domestic level undercard, you know, and those guys would get the opportunities. And I thought, well, if you take the main event away, you don't get the undercard, and maybe the fighters aren't going to get those opportunities. But as we move into 2025, you know, this weekend we've got Donovan and Crocker in a great fight, solid undercard. Jack Cattrall against Arnold Barboza Jr. in Manchester, solid undercard. So it's looking like the opportunities are going to be there. And as you say, maybe these, you know, everyone wants to chase world titles, British titles, European titles, but now maybe seeing somebody like a Josh Padley going out into Saudi Arabia, getting career and life-changing money, that's now
Yeah.
an additional goal to change to chase as well.
Yeah, listen, I think the two of the fights from the card of the weekend had late pullouts, and yeah, two guys came in and got vast sums of money to step in, step up to the plate, and put their name in the hat on this Riyadh season show. So I think that's also, you need to be active, you need to be ready, you need to be in the gym at all times to have a chance of getting on one of these cards. And look at Josh Padley, I think he was fitting solar panels in a loft somewhere, and he got a phone call offered a house and a six-figure paycheck by the sounds of things. So, do you know what? Fair play to him. He went out and gave a great account of himself. He was fit, he was ready, and I should be incredibly proud of himself. And he's obviously changed his life in doing so.
Absolutely. So you know what, Nick? I'm beating around the bush here. Let's jump 2 feet first into Saturday night. Beterbiev Bivol. It was in October. Billed is the best fight that could be made in boxing. It lived up to all expectations. And I don't think, and you can jog my memory if I'm wrong, but I can't think of a fight of this elite level where a rematch has happened with such quick turnaround. You know, back in the day, we'd see fighters. Uh, take a few months, maybe a couple of years, and have a rematch. Look at Fury with Wilder after that first controversial draw.
Yeah.
Joshua Ruiz was a little bit quicker, maybe, but with the influx of Saudi and their hand in things, we're getting massive turnarounds and quick turnarounds. And Artur Beterbiev, Dmitry Bivol agreed to this rematch on February 22nd with what we spoke about last week, maybe the greatest card put together we've ever seen, certainly in my lifetime. It lived up to the expectations again, didn't it? We'll start off with the main event.
Yeah, listen, I think
Dmitry Bivol too.
the only other fight that I can think of, a bit famous historical rematch being turned around so quickly was Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran. Sugar Ray Leonard done that because he knew that Duran would get out of shape and have to try and get back in shape very quickly. But I think these two guys aren't like that. Both of them, the ultimate professionals, dedicated to the craft. Both that Russian school of boxing, the Russian mindset of training, always being ready. So there was never an element of that. But what a fight it was. I think a lot of people had it even after the 24 rounds. Um, I had it 115, 113. Bivol had a round in it. I just thought Bivol came on strong at the end, edged it in those last 2 rounds. Thought he started strong. He was winning every exchange. Then after the first 3 rounds, it seemed to be a big shift. Everybody was kind of speculating, has Bivol done something to his calf? He didn't quite look right. Beterbiev came into it. He was winning every exchange. Then from round 7 onwards, it was a bit back and forth, but I just thought Bivol had the best of it. He kind of came back after that 6th round where he'd been on the 3 round slump. He picked up the pace. He had the best of each round, probably the key decisive moments in each round as well. And then obviously, I thought he just pipped him in the last two. So, hell of a fight. Really hard. Again, if it was a draw, nobody could argue. If Beterbiev won it by a round, nobody could argue. But I think it was good that Bivol got the decision. It sets up that trilogy, and it's going to go down as one of the best trilogies ever. I think hard to argue it's not.
Yeah, absolutely, Neil. You mentioned there that it was nip and tuck all the way through, and that it was good for Bivol winning in terms of we get the trilogy again. But I also think it adds to the mystique and the mythology of both men when they go down in the annals of history as two of the greatest light heavyweights of all time. That the only guy that could beat them was each other. I think it adds to that whole mystique. It makes it, such a bigger story. And if one goes on to win the trilogy, I dare say the trilogy might even be a draw, and that would be even better. But they're almost head and shoulders above, aren't they, Nick? With all due respect to the other light heavyweights in the world, David Benavidez has stepped up. David Morrell took a loss. Callum Smith
Yeah.
beat Boatsi. Anthony Yard, of course. All due respect to those guys, but it does seem like there's a sizable chunk in class between those two in the chasing pack. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, but I can remember thinking, what is next for Callum Smith after his great win with Buatsi? But the only way I can see him winning a world title would be if one of them was to be vacated by Bivol now. I'm not sure how it's going to work. I can't see them fighting again to the end of the year, probably. So maybe one of those belts will get stripped for Bivol now. Maybe they'll set up a fight, So I can't see anybody taking a belt off him in the ring. It's only going to be if either of them get stripped, and the only man that's probably capable of beating the other one is the other guy. So
Absolutely.
two incredible fighters. Real. Do you know what as well? What I really liked? I liked the fact that Beterbiev never complained, never said it was the wrong decision. He never made anything of the judge's decision. He just kind of went, "Listen, this is sport. We dust ourselves off. We go again." That was it, really. Do you know what I mean? And I think a lot of boxers could learn for that.
Yeah,
That's not to
absolutely.
say that, listen, people get robbed and there's wrong decisions, and I think that's always going to be part of the sport, unfortunately. But the class that guy had and the class that Bivol had in the first match, just to kind of go, you know what, he won, fair play to him. We move on, we go again. So refreshing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we see so many times, and there was a couple of dodgy scorecards on Saturday night, and that's again something that we'll delve into. I think one of the things that surprised me a lot, Nick, was we know Artur Beterbiev. He likes to come forward. He's got an incredible output. He is 40 years of age. The thing that impressed me was Bivol's desire to at times stand and trade with him. You know, he always answered what Beterbiev had, and that was something that we all thought he would do because he needs to do more than he did the first time. But in that was where, in my prediction, I predicted a Beterbiev KO because I thought that would happen, but Beterbiev would have enough to take Bivol out. But
Yeah,
Beterbiev was losing the exchanges, especially in those early rounds and then in the mid to late rounds because it was swinging back and forth. It was a brilliant pendulum of a fight. But Bivol's desire and willingness to stand and trade with arguably the most fearsome puncher in world boxing was so admirable, and I think that's ultimately what won in the fight. And I think when you get somebody like Beterbiev and Bivol, I was honestly, I was watching it with a couple of friends. They was having a couple of beers. I was having a Coca-Cola. I was like, I want to watch this with a clear mind. And I found myself smiling at the TV. You know, when I was watching it, I found myself smiling like I was in awe of this. This was like, it could go on for 15 rounds, 24 rounds, and just keep going round after round after round, just let them recharge the batteries. Like I was in absolute awe of it, Nick. I thought it was so good, so efficient, so effective. And it was just the little things as a boxer yourself, you'll be able to tell even better than me. But Bivol's footwork, you could almost crop the screen and just watch his feet in motion at times.
listen, I've actually been lucky enough to go over to St. Petersburg twice, where Bill from, with boxing Scotland when I was an amateur. So I got to learn a little bit about the Russian school of boxing. And obviously, I was in the gym at the same time as Bivol. Luckily enough, got to see him do a little cool down in one of my sessions that we turned up for with the Scotland amateur team. But that Russian school of boxing and the way he was answering each exchange, if Beterbiev went first, he'd reply second. If he went third, he'd reply fourth. As genuinely the Russian school of boxing. It's the way they're drilled from kids. Do you know what I mean? It's that footwork. Everything's, comes from the feet, in and out of the footwork, constantly replying to every attack, riposte, being set, being able to throw, being able to reply to any shot, and the defence in between second, third, fourth phase. These guys are the best at it in the world. It is the Russian school of boxing, that in front of a mirror, literally practicing it in and out of your feet for hours on end, and he's the perfect example of it. I think there's a lot of things we could learn, especially in the West, from the Russian school of boxing, the fundamentals and the basics that they do. It's unbelievable. And like I say, I was lucky enough to go out there for, I think, about 4 weeks in total between the two camps, and to be experienced, immersed in that kind of philosophy and training technique. It was a amazing experience, and what you got to see on Saturday night was the pinnacle of that.
Absolutely, Nick. And it's little gems of information like that is exactly why I wanted you on the podcast today. So yeah, brilliant stuff to hear that. The one thing I'm going to be is slightly controversial here, Nick, and this is what I want the podcast to be. It's open, it's honest, and we don't toe the line if it doesn't need to be told. Everyone's clamoring for the trilogy and saying that we could watch these fight 10 times out of 10 and it'd be five each. The one thing I'm going to say is that I think with Beterbiev's age at 40 years of age, I think the gap's only going to get wider now. I think if the trilogy happens, Bivol starts as a solid favourite for the first time in the two fights. It was always nip and tuck it with the bookies, but I think
Yeah,
Beterbiev's going to decline. He's only human. We talk people up sometimes in boxing, and sometimes it's rightly deserved. When we had Beterbiev down as this indestructible, unbeatable monster, which he looked to be, Bivol's shown that he's human. Bivol's the younger, fresher fighter, and his style, I think, and his ability to adapt cleaner than Beterbiev will only lean to him being a solid favourite in a trilogy or a fourth or a fifth fight, which obviously we're not going to go that far, but you get the point that I'm trying to make.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Take
yeah.
nothing away from Beterbiev, don't get me wrong. I think he's fantastic, fantastic boxer, but age and mother time waits for no man.
No, listen, I think that you're not really going to split these guys on the night, if that makes sense. As in, they're both made out of steel. They're both tough, tough men. They're both supreme boxers, skillful, get everything in, everything in the locker. What's going to set these guys apart is the camp. And I think that comes down to father time, like you said. And I don't know, how many training camps has Bertubé have been in. Bivol arguably has been in as many, but he's just got that 4 or 5 years on him where he can probably put in a solid 10-week training camp, no injuries, nothing holding him back, and he can be really prepared for that one night.
Yeah.
I don't know, like you say, Bertubé is carrying a few injuries. He
Well, did he have his
probably
knee
picked up
straps
a
on
couple.
Saturday as well? So I think
Yeah,
he have knee straps as well on Saturday, maybe. He's
So that's what's going to set these guys apart as the camps. So I think Bivol's ability to have a better camp, better training, be better prepared for the night is probably going to give him the edge in the third one.
absolutely, but by no means, little asterisks to that there. By no means am I trying to talk us out of a trilogy because I absolutely would sit back
No,
and be
listen,
just the same again.
I don't think either guy has another fight. I know that Bivol mentioned after it, maybe Benvenides or maybe, but I don't think there's a much of an appetite for that. I think these guys are going to be the next guys coming through, or maybe after the trilogy, Bivol can go and fight these guys again. There was also mention of Canelo, but he's already beat Canelo. I don't think there'll always be an appetite for that with the Canelo's fan base, but I don't really. There's no need to see it. I think it's the same result if they fight again. So the only fight left for the two of them, or the only next fight for the two of them is each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. Nick, the second fight, or the co-main event, I should say, Joe Parker against Mark Bacoli. We don't need to go into too much of the background, the build-up, because we covered that when we spoke last week, which I thought was a
Yeah.
very insightful chat, and I really enjoyed that conversation. But as it played out on the night, Joe Parker, first of all, let's just mention his physical appearance. He looked unbelievable. Again, I'm sure you had this and insider knowledge anyway, but he looks solid. He didn't look like an ounce of fat on him. It's unbelievable the shape that he's in.
Listen, the work that George Lockhart has done with him is George Lockhart, in my opinion, is one of the best in the world, bar none. Any sport, if you put him in any discipline, any sport, MMA, boxing, rugby, football, George is one of those mad scientists that will find a way to get the best out of whatever individual he's working with. He's incredible. His knowledge is incredible. You can ask him a question about food, supplement, hormones, and exercise in the gym, how to get bigger, how to get stronger, how to get smart. Like this guy knows everything. And he literally had every box ticked for Joe in the past 12 months going into this fight. And yeah, you've seen on the night. He's like, listen, Joe's had to do all the work. Do you know what I mean? It's not like you just have a guy like George and that automatically guarantees you success. You need to do what he's telling you and you need to dedicate yourself to what he's telling you. And he's done that. And then obviously having Andy in your corner from a boxing side of things, I think Andy's corner advice after the first round was key. Joe went back to the corner and he said to him, he's not respecting your power. Throw the overhand right, he's going to walk straight onto it. He caught him with that overhand right and Bacoli shook it off. And at that point, I was a bit like, oh, Jesus, man, this guy, like, you're going to need a baseball bat to stop him. Do you know what I mean? Then, literally 10 seconds later, hits him with the same shot, top of the head, bang, down he goes. But I think that shot knocks anybody out, anybody in the division. I'm not, listen, Martin is not the hardest guy to hit, and he's maybe learned a harsh lesson there on Saturday night that sometimes you're going to have to respect other guys' power, especially a 267 Joe Parker, like you say, in supreme condition. But yeah, Joe looked fantastic. He looked sharp. I thought the tactics were perfect from Andy in the corner. I thought the physical condition that George had Joe in was perfect. And you had the guy in Joe who wasn't gonna be beat on the night.
Absolutely, Nick. I don't want to speak out of turn here, but again, you've got better knowledge of this than most. But or can the team, maybe when you've had conversation with Andy Lee and Joe and whatnot, can you pinpoint a moment where it changed for Joe Parker? Because even though he's been a world champion, this is night and day compared to, say for instance with the Dillian White fight. He went down a couple of times. First time he's been down in his career, he goes down a couple of times against Dillian White, and he almost feels sorry for himself a little bit, and he came away from that, and he kind of garnered this reputation as he's not nasty enough. He doesn't go for the kill. He doesn't go for the knockout. And yeah, he just wasn't nasty enough if it got really down and dirty. And now you look at him and you think, this guy will fight anybody. He'll fight absolutely anybody. And he's fearful of no man. He's grown into himself, and he's still only 33, which is young, or 34 is young for a heavyweight. And
Yeah.
can you pinpoint a moment when that completely changed the mindset, the idea of I am this big bad motherfucker that's going there and I'm going to do damage to people?
I think Joe's always had that mindset. But I think after the Joe Joyce loss, I think Andy kind of said to him, like, you need to change. We need to change what we're doing here. really, double down on everything. And fair play to Joe, because that Joe Joyce loss was a big defeat. Do you know what I mean? He took a hell of a beating that night. He wasn't well going into the fight. It's well documented. I was in sparring with him that week for the Joe Joyce fight, and he was he was pretty bad, to be honest. I think in hindsight, that's a fight that they would have pulled out of, knowing what they know now. But listen, I think you look at the way the guys changed themselves from that point, and a bit of luck involved as well. I mean, asking George to take over his strength and conditioning is probably one of the best things he's ever done in his life, in a boxing sense, because George has completely changed who he is as a fighter. I was lucky enough to be in that first session with him. George took us through a workout, and God, I thought we were both going to faint. Do you know what I mean? How like tough and how rigorous it was, and George was actually saying, "Hey, you're like, you're joking, aren't you? Like, you don't find this is," and we were like, "Nah, this is," or Joe definitely was like, "Yeah, no, this is horrible." And you look at him now, the guy's a complete monster. So yeah, it's just, I think setbacks in life make you reevaluate where you're at and make you double down if you really want to do things. And Joe's bought into everything like Andy and George have told him. He's completely changed his boxing momentum and where he's at. He's been going in a linear straight line all the way up in every fight. So yeah, I think listen, he's worked hard. He's done what he's got a good team around him, world class team around him, and he believes in everything that he's doing. And that's a dangerous thing when you've got a guy who believes in what he's doing, has a world class team around him. He's going to be a hard man to beat.
Absolutely. Now we'll come back to Parker and what may or may not lie in the future for him in the immediate future. With Mike McCauley, we sat
Yeah,
here on Thursday night and we was waxing lyrical that it's such a great opponent to get in at such short notice.
yeah.
Everybody on these social media outlets that were either out in Saudi Arabia or they was available in the UK was all waxing lyrical about it. We couldn't believe how good it was. It's such a great fight. Is it as good as a Daniel Dubois Joe Parker fight? That was some of the debates that were going on. Joe Parker goes in there, does what he needs to do, gets the job done in 2 rounds. We knew Mark McCauley wasn't in fight condition. He was never body beautiful anyway. We spoke about this.
Eh,
It's not chiseled from stone like an Anthony Joshua is maybe. He's not that way inclined. Then immediately after he gets done in 2 rounds with a punch, as you said, that could have done for anybody in the heavyweight division, all of a sudden it was Billy Nelson's a joke for putting him in there. How dare his promoter drag him from the Congo and put him in there? It's such a dangerous fight. It's set his career back. Let's have it right. He's had a career high payday. He might never get that payday again. And from all intents and purposes, he's going on to fight F.A. Jagba in May, which was always the original plan. So, is it
hmm.
a win for Martin Piccoli at this stage?
Eh, I'm a bit in between with the whole, re looking back on it, he was £315 on paper, like wildly out of shape for Martin. Martin was 284 when he fought Anderson, so he's nearly 2 stone heavier. I think after the first round, he went back to the corner. Billy actually said, "Listen, we've not sparred, just ease yourself into this." Joe's just been in a full camp and probably done over 50, 60 rounds of sparring. And you're going in there with no sparring, 2 stone overweight. Realistically, it probably wasn't the right call. It was probably, yeah, it's a career high payday. And I wish, I love, the fact that Martin's probably now financially set for life. But realistically, if it was me, he probably shouldn't have took the fight. Listen, Martin's always going to take the fight. He's that way inclined to fight anybody. He's a tough man, proud man. But maybe Billy and Ben should have looked at the bigger picture and went, you know what? He's going to fly in on 36 hours' notice. He's going to have no sleep. He's going to be jet lagged. He's going in against a guy who's 110% ready. Let's just wait out for the FA Jagba fight become the IBF mandatory anyway. That's gone now. He's still got that fight, but it's not for the IBF mandatory anymore. So in hindsight, it's probably not a great idea, but he's financially set for life. It's a life-changing amount of money, but maybe that was the motive more than the likelihood of winning the fight for me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you kind of made that point because that was my argument, if you like, which is much less valid than yours. But on the flip side, I think, and the way I've kind of looked at it is he's got this payday, he's got the exposure, he's got this reputation, or been able to back up his reputation as a boogeyman. Yes, it didn't go his way, but if he goes to May, fights Efe Ajagba, I make him a big favourite in that fight. I think he'll deal with him in the way he
Yeah,
dealt with Anderson. So even
yeah,
if this fight didn't happen on Saturday night and he went and became IBF mandatory in May, look at how everything's played out, Nick. So Joe Parker's now due a world title shot. Ajit Kabayel's, who we're going to get onto, he's thrown his hat into the mix. They're looking at making Usyk Dubois too. So
yeah.
realistically speaking, when would Coley's IBF mandatory have been called anyway? Because we're going to get a unification with Usyk Dubois. Parker still needs to fight with one of the world champions, whoever that might be, once Usyk and Dubois fight, because it looks like that's going to happen ahead of Joe Parker getting his shot. So then Ajit Kabayel's in the mix. It all gets a bit murky, doesn't it?
Yeah, but that's not as boxing. I think that the whole
So that's why
Dubois
I think it was win-win. Sorry, that was my point I was trying to get to. That's why I think it's win-win because by the time he gets the Jagba win, fights somebody else, maybe gets another win. For me, he's still going to be in the same position anyway because I don't think his mandatory was going to be called anytime soon.
yeah, maybe. I think the whole Dubois thing's a bit sus.
Yeah.
Joe came through that fight relatively unscathed. Why could Joe not fight Dubois next like he was supposed to in the first place? But it's boxing, so it is what it is. Maybe I think the route for Bacoli now could be he gets a full camp, demolishes a Jagba, and they might look to put Kabayel and Bacoli in together for an eliminator to fight the winner of Dubois, Usyk, Parker, or maybe the winner of that then goes on to fight Joe Parker. But Joe definitely deserves a world title shot now out of anybody in the division. I would say it was got to be Joe Parker first, then arguably Caballero, and then outside of that, I'm not too sure if Dubois and Usyk are going to fight. So it's going to, like you say, it's very complicated. There's a lot of moving parts, and all depends what Turkey wants to see as well. But I think the appetite from fight fans is going to be for Joe Parker to get a world title shot now. Be interesting to see if this Dubai Usyk things come off. I've heard rumours that it might be May for the two of them, so not too long to wait. But then who knows? Let's see what happens. But yeah, potentially going back to Piccoli, it might not be a bad thing in the long run for him because I think it's a good thing that he gets that boogeyman title taken off him a bit because maybe it'll make other guys open to fighting him a bit more. And I still think if he did have proper preparation, a 10-week camp, it would have made a much, much tougher fight for Joe on Saturday night. I think you've seen parts of the first round where Martin looked dangerous. He landed some good shots. Yeah, but I just think the conditioning and the weight are a big deal for him. I'm hoping that he can maybe get his weight down a bit and try and float around the 290 mark rather than up at 315 because it's not a good position to be in going into a camp and needing to lose 30 or 40 pounds before you can get yourself down to your fighting weight. It's not the biggest loser. Whether you want to come in at a decent weight to start, I mean, you hit the ground running. No, Weight Watchers. And listen, I really like Big Martin. He's a cracking big guy. He's a phenomenal fighter. I just want to see him give it his best shot. Come in and have a good 10-week camp, not be trying to cut weight before he has to start the camp, if that makes sense. So maybe this could be a good moment for Martin to reevaluate what he's doing in his conditioning and his diet and his nutrition and stuff like that, and be a better starting point for him in his next camp.
Yeah, absolutely. For what it's worth, just to close out this segment, I'm going to chuck in my 10 pence worth, which, and I think, people will say boxing's not fair, life's not fair, or whatnot. But in the interest of fairness, and we've seen with Turk Al Sheikh that he likes to forward think, he likes a forward plan. I think in say May, back end of May, early June, we should see a double header of Dubois against Joe Parker, Usyk against Ajit Kabayel, and then the winners plan to fight in maybe November, December. And I think that placates everybody. It gives us, as boxing fans, it gives us another huge show, another massive double header. It gives everybody what they deserve, and it also makes plans for another huge fight further down the line. So that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, listen, I think Martin was supposed to be fighting an IBF eliminator. Then I don't know. Aye, like so maybe Joe beating Martin. Definitely, Joe deserves a world title shot. Caballero would definitely be one of the guys in question to get a shot against Usyk. So yeah, that would please me. I think it would please a lot of fight fans, and it's probably the four informed guys in the division. So I personally wouldn't have an issue with that. I think it's a good call.
Absolutely. I think I need to give Matchroom a shout and become a matchmaker because I'm giving it away for free here and that's not on.
Mate, get on it, man. I've got you. I'll be your back, man. I'll be your back.
Well, if I've got Big Nick Campbell in my corner, then I'm fancying my chances of getting a fair shake from Meda or Turkey or anybody that needs to negotiate. Nick, we'll move on. Another fight that was on the card. We'll do this. I was going to go in order of the fights that was on the show. Let's just touch on Zhang Caballero because we've been giving Caballero a lot of props there. Let's talk about it. Zile Zhang,
Yeah.
we know how good of a puncher he is. But for me, Nick, I always thought this was waiting to happen. I thought if somebody could go in there with the right game plan, we've seen Joe Parker beat him, didn't really put a dent in him, but he beat him and he beat him well on points. We've seen Zhang blow away Joe Joyce and he's blew away Deontay Wilder. I thought Ajit Cabell was the closest thing to a surefire win on this card. Take away Shakur Stevenson against the late placement Josh Padley. I always thought this was a Ajit Cabell win, and I always thought it was going to be an Ajit Cabell win by stoppage, and that's how it kind of played out. But that moment where Zhang put him down just went to show how dangerous he is, and that you can't blink for a second, especially in the heavyweight division.
Yeah, listen, I think I spoke to you earlier in the week. I fancied Caballero by stoppage later on. So I wasn't 100% on the money. Done it in the first half of the fight in the sixth round, but I said that the body punching would be a significant factor. So I was nearly on the money, nearly on the money. But yeah, I know how fit Caballero is. Agate is incredibly fit. His punch output is enormous, and he's a ferocious body puncher. And I think after the first round, I think Zhang caught him clean in the first round, if I remember correctly. And I think it was a kind of right, okay, I can handle your power here. And then he just sat in the pocket, walked away, never let Zhang get his breath, just kept a high pace. And yeah, you seen what happened. The one thing that, you know, he's always dangerous. He's always got that one shot where he can just catch you, boom, and you're flat on your back. But listen, Cabell bounced up, I think, after 3 or 4 seconds, and he came back on strong the rest of the round. But yeah, I think a brilliant performance for Agate. He executed his game plan perfectly. Listened to his coach Sukru in the corner very well. They executed whatever game plan they wanted to deploy, as was seen. And yeah, the body punching was sickening. Not, you know what? It was a wee bit unfortunate to see Zhang go out in that way. I think he's been a great fighter. He's had been in some great fights. He's put on some really entertaining shows. But like we touched on earlier, Father Time is undefeated, and I think really he's probably finished now. The only other fight I could maybe see him being in would be Chisora. That would be a pretty fan friendly fight. I think two older statesmen in the division, but definitely guaranteed fireworks pre and during the fight. The press conference would be pretty funny.
You're selling it to me. You're selling it to me.
But I think Chisora's the IBF mandatory, so unless he was getting chucked a few £1 million, I can't see that happening. But outside of Chisora, he's probably going to get chucked to the likes of what's his name, Moses Hatauma, and I think Hatauma would do a complete demolition job on him with how young, fit, aggressive, sharp he is. So yeah, I think that's the kind of route that Zhang's going down. He's going to be that kind of not a gatekeeper, but somebody that you can chuck a young prospect in and see how good he is and see how quick he can beat Zhang up, which I don't know, it depends what his motivation is. But yeah, listen, he's had a great career, great performance for Caballero, and yeah, what
Nick,
can
do
I
you, do you
can
know of
talk
anybody? Do you know of any other heavyweight that has the body work, the body attacks of Ajit Cabello? Because it's again something I've not really seen at heavyweight. It's so sustained, so targeted. You see the odd shot here and there, uh,
Yeah,
but to be so sustained in multiple different fights, we've seen it with Frank Sanchez. We've seen it with a big Russian guy that he stopped. He's not just doing it
yeah,
against plodding journeyman. With all due respect, that he's trying to slow down to ultimately take out. He's doing this methodically and winning via body shots, which is a rarity at heavyweight. Have you ever known another heavyweight to be that true to that?
No, no, not really. The only other heavyweight who I would put in the same bracket as being a ferocious body puncher is Martin McCauley. He's actually a great body puncher when he starts putting his shots together and mixing up head to body. And he generates a lot of power. He's the only other guy who can maybe match Caball's ferocity in that sense. But aye, Caball's putting three and four body shots together. That was the difference. There was some points in the fight. I think he landed four clean body shots in Zhang. You could see that it was hurting him. It was breaking him down, and that the gas tank issue that he's always had
Yeah.
exposed that massively. I think it was a combination. He was hurt and he was also just completely went down.
Nick, one of the true feel-good moments of Saturday night, and boxing rarely provides feel-good moments. There's so many tragic and unfortunate tales in boxing, but Josh Padley coming in at late notice, it got slightly overshadowed with the Coley Parker situation that we spoke about earlier. He comes in, he's away fitting air conditioning units or solar panels or something along them lines. He chucks his tools on the floor. He says, "You know what? I'm off to Saudi. I'm going to fight one of the best in my division, and I'm going to make a shed load of money at the same time." And he put on a real performance against somebody that's championed as a pound for pound superstar, a future pound for pound number one in Eddie Hearn's words. Josh Padley wasn't completely disgraced in there, Nick. I was really, really proud of him as a boxing fan, as an Englishman, as a general human being. What a performance from him in defeat. Ultimately Shakur Stevenson got the stoppage, and I don't think that was to the surprise of anybody. But Padley's heart and desire and minerals and balls can never be called into question.
No, no, no. Do you know what? One of my favourite stories was that he parked the van at the airport and just left it. So I hope that Turkey's picking up the bill for that as well as the new house and as well as.
Absolutely.
Listen, do you know what? Like, what guts the guy showed. Never showed any sign of give up in him. And there was, I was so impressed with Stevenson's jab, razor sharp. Some of his shot selection was incredible. The defense, the shoulder roll reminded me a lot of Money Mayweather. But any time that he had a bit of success, landed two or three shots, Padley came roaring back and was having a go. And I think,
Absolutely.
one thing Padley's done is he's probably showed us that he's a few levels above where we thought he was at. I'm not saying that he's going to beat Shakur Stevenson. That's not in a rematch. I'm not saying that, and I think he knows that himself. But he's definitely a much higher level than British,
Yeah,
and I'd be very interested to see where he goes because his stock's risen massively. And I think the fact that he was willing to come in, save the show, and really take a risk. He could have came over and been really embarrassed. Like we said, he was fitting solar panels in a roof somewhere, and then he's got a phone call to fight, like you said, a pound for pound future great. So he's definitely stock has risen. I think he would have gained a lot of supporters on Saturday night, and hopefully we're going to see him in some big, massive fights. Hopefully out in Saudi, hopefully making a hell of a load more of money because having the balls to do that and stepping up and doing it, he deserves it.
yeah, absolutely. A couple of things on Josh, when he's getting a lot of flowers and rightly so, but let's have it right. There's a couple of things we need to mention here. And I seen somebody tweet saying, "What about the old lady whose house he was working on? That'll be freezing cold now because the solar panels aren't working." That's something that needs to be discussed. We're not spending some of that Saudi money as well.
Well, listen, I think, he's probably got a few quid in his bank account. He can go out and buy a lovely bunch of flowers and go back and finish the job. But nah, listen, I think you'd be struggling to find a bad word to say about the lad. Do you know what I mean? He's changed his life for the better, and his family's life probably. He's got the house. He's hopefully got the ticket paid for at the airport.
Exactly. Did
um,
you see that tattoo of his on his back?
Mad, aye, mad. It
Is
was
it is it
who was it? Mike Tyson? Was it
Mike
Mike Tyson?
Tyson punching Zeus or something like that? That's some
I
piece of work, that.
the only he's a Sheffield boy, isn't he?
Sheffield, Doncaster, Yorkshire, that kind of way, yeah.
Place you would see a tattoo like that, I think.
Don't get us in trouble with the Yorkshire side of things. I'm obviously I'm over on the other side here. So let's not get me in trouble.
Um,
Um,
Listen, I've got a lot of good friends with Doncaster and Sheffield from my rugby days, so I'm sure they'll appreciate that.
so in terms of Shakur Stevenson, right? It was lose lose for him. It was either he gets beat in one of the biggest upset shocks of all time if Josh Padley come in there and got the win. He's fighting a late replacement guy. He goes 9 rounds. Now we know Shakur Stevenson is not necessarily the biggest puncher, but I think there was, for me, Nick, there was a touch too much arrogance, and there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And there was times in there where I thought Shakur was, he was acting like he was fighting a Javante Davis or a Keyshawn Davis or a Lomachenko, and he had that kind of, oh, I've done this, I've done you, with his celebrations. And yeah, fair play, celebrate you when you've done that. But take into context who it's against and what he's come through to get to this point, I think it was lose-lose for Shakur in that respect.
Yeah, I think it's maybe a culture thing as well. Maybe your background and your cultural kind of. I've never really been about that. I know we're probably very similar in that respect. I know. I just think that's kind of the American sort of attitude is, you know, he probably took it as disrespect that Padley was willing to take the fight,
Yeah,
rather than the way Joe took it. Like he was thankful that Martin had came over and saved the day. So it's just a different outlook. But you know what? Like love him or hate him, go back to the Mayweather thing. It's probably going to get more people watching him because they want to see him be beat.
absolutely.
So he's probably
Absolutely.
learned well from Floyd in that sense. Do you know? I think he kind of mentors him a little bit, and maybe there was a little element of that there, whereas I'll make people dislike me, so more of them tune in and watch me get beat, and I'll win anyway.
Yeah,
That's his kind of attitude.
yeah, and he's not wrong for doing that, Nick, because one thing that you've got to do in boxing, especially at that elite level, is you've got to be a sellable commodity. It's all well and good being the best or being highly talented. You've got to be able to sell a fight, and maybe that is what Shakur's doing. And I think in his defense, he could only beat who was in front of him. And I think he's going to be one of these fighters that when he fights the more elite operators, we've seen him in with like Oscar Valdez and he stopped Jamel Herring. These are guys with all due respect to Josh Padley that have accomplished a lot more in their careers. That maybe
Aye.
when he does get in with a Gervonta Davis, I mentioned before with Keyshawn Davis, they're obviously never going to fight. They're very close friends, but there is Gervonta Davis, there's Lomachenko, there's Devin Haney, there's Ryan Garcia all floating around that 135, 140 mark. I think it'd be right in saying that he's going to be one of those guys that'll perform better against a better opposition because there is fighters like that. There's a lot of fighters like that.
I think as well, he's probably not a fan friendly style. Like for the casual, he's probably not that interested because he's not a one punch knockout artist. I don't think I'm sure he punches hard for the weight, but I don't think he's a concussive puncher at the weight. He's just very, very skillful, get everything going for him as a boxer, but maybe not that rugged one punch knockout artist style that is very fan friendly. So you look at Floyd, he was maybe a little bit the same in the latter part of his career, but he made himself the commodity by just having people love him or hate him, and you want to tune in and watch him. Because I think if you actually watch some of Floyd's fights back, they're not necessarily the most entertaining in terms of back and forth dust ups. It's just Floyd giving people boxing lessons, and some people probably find that boring. Do you know what I mean? You think about some of the fights Floyd was in, they were never even 50-50. Do you know what I mean? It was just him beating people up for,
That's
for
case in point. How many people, MMA fans, did you see jump on the bandwagon and say Conor McGregor was going to knock out Floyd? Us as boxing fans, boxing purists, boxers as yourself, we
yeah,
knew how that was going to play out the whole time. That Floyd was never in 1 second of trouble. That's
yeah,
case in point there, isn't it? To go put a fine tune to it.
yeah. So listen, I'm not saying he's not in. I find him incredibly entertaining to watch because I'm a boxing fan. But for the casual fans, he maybe needs to add that element of love me or hate me, tune in to watch me get beat, tune in to watch me win. Just yeah, and especially the era that we're living in with social media and influencers and the power of social media to get more people behind them, having a little bit of controversy behind them. Yeah, I think I actually seen a nice tweet from him, to be fair, where he thanked Josh Padley, gave him his props, and he just kind of said, I respect you for coming out saving the day. So it was nice to see that. I don't think I think that what you see on the screen and what in real life are two different things. He's probably a very respectful boy, but when you're in the ring, you need to step through the ropes and become a different person, different persona, and whatever it is you need to get you over the line, you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's a boxer's insight to it, which is highly fascinating. Nick, two fights that I want to merge together, and we'll get a quick review on with no disrespect to the fighters involved, just because I want to give a decent segment to the last fight we're going to talk about, which was the first fight on the bill, which was Boate against Smith. We had Israel Madrimov, Virgil Ortiz. They fought to a close point decision that went in favor of Virgil Ortiz. He remains undefeated. And we also had a controversial draw for Hamza Shiraz, the British middleweight. He drew with Carlos Adames in a fight that many people thought he lost and lost
Yeah.
well, to be fair. It just wasn't his night. Give me your thoughts on those two fights, Nick. I thought Israel Madrimov and Ortiz was a flip of a coin. Maybe the strong finish from Ortiz got him the win. We've heard things that Madrimov wasn't right in the build up to that fight. But the Hamza Shiraz, again, we don't toe the line. We're going to call it as it is. Hamza's a great guy. He's a great ambassador for British boxing and for what's going on in Riyadh season. But he didn't win that fight, Nick. He didn't win that fight.
No, just on Madrimov and Ortiz quickly, I thought just on what we touched on, Madrimov's not a casual friendly fighter. His footwork was unbelievable for the first 6 rounds. Like those Uzbeks are different level when it comes to boxing skill set. Unbelievable. I thought Ortiz just edged it. I think if you're going to come and take the title off somebody, you really need to go and earn it. And I don't think that Madrimov done that. He was too cautious. It was too much, you know, boxing on the back foot and stuff like that. It's never going to win in a world title fight, in my opinion. Um, and yeah, maybe he wasn't right going in, and that's why he couldn't step on the gas and you know put more shots together, put more hurtful shots together. But yeah, Ortiz was the winner for me. Close fight, but Ortiz was the winner. And then Adames, Shiraz, I think Shiraz broke his hand early on, which we didn't know at the time, but maybe that was the reason why he was being so conservative. Because normally he's out there putting his shots together, throwing big bombs, hurting people once he gets them hurt, stepping on. He never really done that in this fight. And I think the hand must have been a factor. It must have been. Um, Also, the weight, I think Frank touched on it at the end. He's very tight at the weight. And what is he, 6'4"?
Yeah, how did he ever make 154, Nick? If we're complaining here that he's struggling at 160, how did he ever make 154? Scary.
Nuts. But yeah, maybe being that tight at the weight is meaning that he's not really able to showcase his abilities anymore at the weight. So I think for Shiraz, he needs to really have a think now whether he's going to step up in weight, whether he can still make that weight effectively, and if he can still be the same fighter he is at that weight. So that's a thing him and his team will have to go away and discuss. But I thought Adam has just nicked it. I thought he was more aggressive, more come forward, and being the champion, he deserved this. He just deserved to pip him, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And quickly, I'm just going to mention here, and I've got witnesses that vouched it, that watched the fight with me. I called Hamza Shiraz having a broken hand during the fight, so you could absolutely notice that was happening. And I'm taking my flowers for that here. But Nick, we'll move on to what was the fight of the night. We've already mentioned that this could have been a headliner anywhere in the UK and would have sold out arenas. It felt bizarre to me that, normally, if you're not at the fight, if you're not ringside, if you're not obviously in the media capacity working the show, you have a little bit of a routine. You have friends around or whatnot. You might watch it on your own, but you have your little routine where you might have your beers, your soft drinks, whatever's your flavor. You might order a pizza. It felt weird that a fight of this quality was on, taking place while it was still sunny outside. The pizza had not even been ordered. They'd not even placed the Domino's order, and this fight was on. It was happening.
Domino's,
It was so bizarre.
Domino's doesn't open till 5.
There we go. There we go. But it promised a lot and it delivered a lot. It really did. When we champion how good the main event was, which it was. But in terms of sheer heart, sheer gut, sheer determination, sheer will to win, not to take a backward step, to mask being hurt, which both guys was throughout the fight. These two was unbelievable at it. The poker face on both of them. I'd never get a deck of cards out in front of either of them because they'd blagged the life out of me. They hid that pain, that suffering so well, and ultimately Calvin Smith, who was the underdog going in, prevailed on the cards. I thought he was a deserved winner. But
Yeah,
hats off to both men, and certainly that's a fight that if we are going to have the belts mixed up and then divided with Bivol and Beterbiev, I'd see that fight again for a world title certainly.
oh, definitely. Listen, it was a weird, like you say, the order. I thought the Boatse Smith Cabell Yang could have maybe moved up to 3 and 4. And then the first, Madrimov, Ortiz, and the way how exciting they were. But listen, they were for world titles and stuff like that, and the excitement doesn't always necessarily mean your place on the card. But for me, it was probably the fight of the night. I had everything. I thought Boazzi really showed his warrior spirit. He came through like some of the shots, some of the punishment that he was taking. Geez, man, I don't know how he stayed on his feet because he was hurt at times. But that goes to show the guy's willpower, the guy's determination, and how tough he is. And then, yeah, I thought, Smith also was in trouble sometimes in the fight. I thought he kind of started to lull a little bit in 11 and 12, and Boazzi maybe had a little surge in those last two rounds. But I thought Smith had done enough over the piece to get a decision. I thought his shot selection was incredible. He's picking body to head. Aye, the vicious left hooks that he was landing on Boazzi as well. He couldn't seem to miss with that left hook, and it's a pit. He's one of his most powerful shots. So that again highlights how tough Boazzi is. But an incredible fight, and yeah, it was probably a hard one to follow, to be honest, for the rest of the card.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can stamp our colours to the mast earlier with that round six as an early contender for round of the year. We're going to go some way in 2025 to find a better round than that round six where Callum Smith hurt Boazzi. He looked like he was on the verge of taking him out. And Boazzi, in the last 10, 15 seconds, he flipped the whole script on his head and he went looking for Callum Smith. And it looked like Callum Smith could be took out and then he was saved by the bell.
Yeah,
And to say that that we was worried that Saudi was going to be lacking in atmosphere, and that Joshua Buatsi and Callum Smith deserved a bigger crowd. There was a standing ovation at the end of round six. We've seen Anthony Joshua, Eddie Hearn, amongst other promoters and boxers, and everyone around the ring stood up and clapped at the end of round six. Just goes to show how great of a round and how great of a fight that was. And yeah, round six for me is going to be an early contender for round of the year. It encapsulated everything that
I,
was great about the fight.
I think it's just a shame what time of the year this fight was in. Because if this fight was in October, November, there's no doubt about it. It would be getting fight of the year, round of the year. It'd be winning it all. But it's just a shame. I hope it doesn't get forgotten later in the year because there's no doubt going to be more great fights. There's fights that we don't know yet. There's fights that are going to be contenders as well. I just hope that the timing of the fight within the year doesn't take away from it potentially getting either of those accolades because it was unbelievable. And
Absolutely.
like you said, I'm still shocked that it was at 5 o'clock at night.
Absolutely. You know what, Nick, just to finish on with that fight, because like we say, we give each fight roughly, its fair segment on the pod. I'm not going to say this is my opinion, but just to throw it out there, right? With that fight, does that show that Boazzi isn't as good as we thought he was, or that Callum Smith is still better than what we thought he was, if that makes sense? That Callum Smith hadn't declined and that Boazzi wasn't quite as good because it looked like, Dan Aziz was a great win for Boazzi, but he seems to have been treading water for a little bit. Maybe, Matchroom clearly didn't see the full potential of him. They let him go to Boxer where they didn't put the full machine behind him. They thought he was going to be the next big thing at Matchroom. They didn't quite fulfill that potential. And we always was waiting for him to break through. And that when he got the biggest fight of his career this far, he come up short in a great fight. Is that showing his limitations, or that's just showing he's come up against a fighter that hadn't declined as much as what people thought? Again, not my opinion, just throwing it out there.
I think Callum Smith's a great fighter. I think he's only been beat off great fighters. Like he's never lost a fight to anybody who wasn't considered great. What's he lost to Canelo, he lost to Beterbiev. They're two all-time greats, really, when you think about it. So I think Callum Smith's still a great fighter. I think maybe he just had that old man edge on Boazzi where he knew how to just pick him apart a little bit quicker. And Boazzi's maybe still lacking a little bit. Well, he's definitely lacking in experience compared to Callum Smith. Maybe that was the difference on the night. As well, the camp, like I said, the camp things have probably went into it. Maybe Boazzi never had quite as good a camp as he would have liked. Maybe Callum Smith had a great camp. There's loads of different variables. You're not too sure, but no, listen, I think Callum Smith deserves the world title shot next. Hopefully, one of the belts gets vacated and he can get a fight against somebody for that. I think that's what he deserves. I don't see him beating Bivol, or he definitely won't. He's been beat off Beterbiev already, so I don't see that either of those fights happening in the interim between that trilogy. So hopefully one of the belts is vacated and he can get a handy. You don't know, maybe he could fight a what's the Mexican guy's name again? I always forget it.
Beterbiev.
Benvenidez. Maybe Callum Smith Benvenidez would be a good fight. I don't know.
Sign me up
Don't
for
know,
that
but
straight away. Yeah.
a hell of a fight. So I think that he definitely deserves a world title shot. And for Boatse, don't know where he goes. Maybe an Anthony Yard.
Yeah,
Would
that
that
still
be?
sells. Still sells.
Yeah. Um, Outside that, I'm not too sure, but maybe somebody like Anthony Yard Boatse. It's a chance for him to put himself back up into world title contention. Chance for Anthony Yard to put himself, back up the pecking order a bit. So that could be a hell of a fight, and I think it's very fan friendly. British fight, could be in Britain, could sell out a big arena or something like that. So yeah, both fighters still have plenty of options going forward. Boatse can come again. There's no shame in being defeated over the 10 or what was it 10 round 12 rounds by Callum Smith. So
Yeah,
aye.
absolutely. I'll tell you what, Nick, between us here, just before we carry on, we're building one hell of a card here. I think we've got Usyk against Caballero main event. We've got Dubois against Parker co-main. We've got Benavidez against Callum Smith. We've got Anti Yard against Joshua Buatsi. We've got Shakur Stevenson against Javante Davis. Someone's got to have deep pockets for this. I don't think the Turk Al Sheikh can afford to pay for this one.
Listen, mate, I think that guy can afford to pay for anything he wants.
But just to close off on that, for what it's worth, my opinion, I think Joshua Buatsi will come again. I think he is good. He's a great guy. I've spoken to him a couple of times. He's a good guy.
Really?
Down Smith was just better on the night, and he does deserve a world title. But JB will certainly be back. Nick, it was billed as the card of the century, the card of a lifetime. Now, after the fact, do you still believe that it lived up to the billing?
Yeah, last night was incredible. Obviously the pullouts in the week maybe just took a little bit away from it, what has been the card of the century, but I still can't really think of a better card this year. I think Josh Parley came in, gave a great account of himself. I still believe that Martin McCullough, with a camp behind him, is the other best heavyweight in the division. Potentially, Caballero might have something to say about that, but him and Caballero are the other two best guys out there. Don't think we can fully judge him on his performance, but yeah, it was still an incredible card. And the other thing is, they're not going to go right. Okay, that's it. We've done that now. Let's just go back to having rubbish cards. They're going to be thinking, how can we make this better again? I think
Absolutely.
that's going to be the same with Riyadh and Turkey. So yeah, His Excellency is not going to rest on his laurels now. He's going to be looking to put on an even bigger and better card.
Absolutely. We look forward to that, Nick. The wheel of boxing, the boxing world is constantly turning. We roll into another fight week. We've got boxing on TNT. We've got Ryan Garner. He's going for the European Super Featherweight title. He's on a good run of form. Joe Joyce returns on that card. We got Javante Tank Davis against Lamont Roach Jr. But the main one, the big one, certainly in UK and Ireland, fight again that you're kind of linked to is Lewis Crocker against Paddy Donovan, and it pits Andy Lee against Billy Nelson. Again, they was obviously the corners of Joe Parker and Martin McCauley, respectively. They go at it again this week. Nick, for me, as big as the Riyadh season cards are and will be, you just can't beat a proper grudge match. And we've seen at the first press conference for Crocker Donovan, there's needle there, this competitive edge. This promises to be an absolute barnstormer of a fight. It's going to be rocking in Belfast. I'm gutted I'm not going to be there. I believe you are going to be there. But sell it to me, Nick. Why is this such a great fight?
You know what? It's probably the biggest fight I can ever remember in Irish boxing in the past 20, 30 years. When have we had two welterweights, Irish,
Yeah,
both arguably two of the best welterweights contenders out there? Um, it's not North versus South, it's Limerick versus Belfast. It's an incredible fight. It's a good card as well. The Belfast fight fans, Paddy's going to bring a hell of a load of men up from Limerick. Lewis is obviously in his hometown. He's a heavily favourite, or a big favourite in Belfast in the boxing scene. So it's going to be a hell of an atmosphere. I've been lucky enough to be at a couple of the SSE Hydro shows in Belfast before for Mick Conlon and stuff like that, and the atmosphere is incredible. So I'm lucky enough to be attending. Was talking to Andy and stuff through the week. I think I'm going to head through and try and link up with them, enjoy the moment, enjoy being inside the camp, and obviously, listen, I like Lewis. I know Billy. I know the team. there's no hard feelings, but I'll obviously be supporting Paddy this weekend and hoping that he can continue on the run for Andy Lee's stable.
Of course, now with obviously Andy Lee, you got that victory over Billy Nelson. Maybe the trainers don't look into it quite as much as us pundits will do and boxing fans chatting about it. Regardless of the circumstances of how it come around, knowing him the way you do, how much would Billy Nelson want to get one over on Andy Lee from a personal perspective? I know the fight takes precedent and he'll want Crocker to win just because, but will that play a part in Billy's mind after the fact that if he gets the win, that he'll be like doubly appreciative, if that makes sense?
Nah, do you know what? The two,
No.
I don't know if you see the car or the interview. The both, both Andy and Billy respect one another. They were both supportive, or Andy was definitely supportive of Billy after the fight. Understood his reasons for taking the fight. Whether or not you agree with him or not, like me, but I can still understand why he took it. But yeah, listen, I think maybe add a little element of extra competition to it if you could possibly put any extra competition on it. But no, I don't think so. I think they both really respect one another, and I think regardless of who was in the opposite corner, they'd still be pushing just as much for the man to win, both Andy and Billy.
Interesting. And taking all allegiances out of it, Nick, we're going to close off with, can I get a prediction out of you for this, or are we going to get a percentage like we done for Parker Bacoli? Which way are we going with this?
Listen, I think I'll say it's a 50-50. But if I was betting on it, I'd be putting a little bit of money on Paddy. I think he's the silkier boxer. I think he's also brought George Lockhart onto the team now, and George has been working with him in camp, which has added an extra dimension to Paddy's game. He's very, very confident, and yeah, I'm fancying Pat. I don't think Lewis has got a plan B if his plan A doesn't work. I think Paddy's potentially got plan A, B, and C. So be very interesting to see how it plays out on the night. And I'm very excited to go and watch a very entertaining fight. 50-50. I'll maybe go 51-49 to Paddy Donovan because I'm backing Paddy and I think that he's going to do the job. So yeah, there you go. There's a prediction for
I
you.
knew I'd get it out of you. I knew I'd get it out of you. Nick, I've enjoyed every second of the podcast. I think it's been really, really good. Is there anything you'd like to add before we close out?
Nah, do you know what? Really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed building up to this card. Obviously, when Dubois and Parker was announced, I have a lot of experience being in the Dubois camp, and then it's kind of a bit ironic that Bacoli was the next man that I've had the most experience with. So, now I've had great fun covering this. I love the sport of boxing. Hope everybody enjoyed listening to me and look, and definitely be back on the channel again soon. It's great chatting to you, man. I've loved it.
Yeah, I really, really do appreciate that. Guys, make sure you go and check Nick out on social media, Nick Campbell on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, add him up. He's a really, really great guy. I'm not just saying that because he's twice the size of me, all due respect. Guys, this has been the Let's Talk Boxing podcast. Make sure whichever platform you consume this podcast on, whether it's YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, you leave us a like, leave us a review, give us a share. It's all appreciated. We'll be back with further special guests who have big boots to fill because Nick Campbell's been brilliant today. But for now, I'm Luke SimBoxx, and I'll catch you on the next one.